Hi guys! Today I'm going to be reading from our book Weasel, chapter 18, the second to last chapter in the book. So chapter 18, I'm on page 109 for you to follow along. The street in town was full of wagons and horses and children. Folks looking uncomfortable but proud in their fancy clothes were laughing and hollering back and forth to each other, catching up on the news. Business at Whitefield's store was booming. Colin was hard at work, filling grain and feed orders for his pa. No more games of Daniel Boone and the Indians, I thought, and it's just as well. I didn't reckon Colin would have taken kindly to my new ideas on how the game should be played. Fiddlers and banjo players were gathering and tuning up on the porch outside the store. Usually the contest and dance were held in the barn out back of the store, it being the only place in town big enough to hold everyone. But when the store's trade began to slow down, Mr. Whitefield stepped outside and announced that the festivities would be held right out in the street in front of the store, seeing as how it was such a fine day. A cheer went up from the crowd, and people moved their wagons farther down the road to make more room. Eli Tanner played a lick on his fiddle to get things going. Eli won the contest every year. He could play so fast and so fine that folks found themselves dancing, whether they meant to or not. And they said he must have made a pact with the devil to be able to play like that. Pa said that the part about the devil was nonsense, but Eli sure did have a way with the fiddle. One by one, the players took their turns. Some were good, and some were pretty terrible, I reckon. But everyone got a big round of clapping from the crowd. Then Colin's twin aunts, Carolina and Georgia Whitefield, played a duet. It was a long hymn, very solemn and mournful, and so their faces as they played it. Molly and I started to giggle, and Pa gave me a sharp elbow in the side. We cheered extra hard when they finally stopped. Then Hector Wynot got up. Hector lived in a corner of the livery stable and did odd jobs to earn his keep. He showed up in town years back, not knowing his name or how he came to be there. Folks in town figured something had happened to his traveling party on their trip out west, and he just plain lost his memory of the whole thing. They started calling him Hector. Why not? They asked, since he didn't know his real name. Hector Why Not he became, and it suited him fine. Whatever had happened to Hector somewhere in his life, he'd learned to play that fiddle. That was for sure. We cheered and clapped when he was through. But Eli won the contest hands down. He played a long song too. It started out slow and built till it was so wild and fast that folks were stomping and cheering and whistling. Then it began to wind down, so sweet and sad it felt like he was running that bow over all the feelings you had inside and making them rise up in your throat at the same time. There were tears streaming down folks' faces, and they didn't even know it. They were just so caught up in the music. When Eli finished, there was a dead quiet in the street before we recovered enough to clap and show our appreciation. Pa whistled between his teeth so loud Molly and I had to cover our ears. Mr. Whitefield made a speech and handed Eli the $5 gold piece that was this year's prize, and we all headed for our wagons and picnic baskets. After supper, people napped or talked quietly, enjoying the warmth of the sun and the company of other people after the loneliness and isolation of winter. I lay on my back in the wagon bed, my face turned to the sun, listening to the soft sounds of babies fussing, mothers soothing, horses whining, voices talking and laughing. I've got to get Pa to teach me how to whistle like that, I thought. Feeling peaceful and happy, I drifted off to sleep. I woke to the sound of instruments being tuned and Colin's voice in my ear. Nathan, he said, can you help me? Pa wants me to spread some straw on the muddy spots in the street so that folks can dance. Sure, I answered, climbing out of the wagon bed. When we finished our task, a cheer went up from the crowd. Colin began clowning around, bowing and waving, so I did too. Then the music started, and the streets filled with people dancing. I saw Pa dancing with Molly, playing his mouth harp at the same time. I saw Miss Georgia Whitefield headed my way through the crowd, and Quick ran up to stand behind Eli before she could ask me to dance. From behind Eli's flying hands, I grinned as Pa was whirled about, first by Miss Georgia, then Miss Carolina, then any number of ladies. For his part, it looked like Pa was having the time of his life. Molly and her friends were practicing dance steps on the edges of the crowd and giggling. When she looked up to see where I was standing, I did an imitation of how they looked. She stuck out her tongue at me, and we both laughed. When the musicians took a break, Eli turned around to me. You play the fiddle, boy, he asked. No, sir, I said, but I'd sure like to learn. You get yourself a fiddle and come see me, he said, and turned back to his playing. I didn't move for the rest of the night. I just watched Eli's fingers and listened to that sweet, sweet music. I thought I'd give anything to be able to play like that. When the dance was over and the crowd began drifting away, Eli put his fiddle in its case. Seeing me still there, he said, You want to learn to fiddle? You come see me. He headed off into the night. Pa and Molly and I found each other and walked to the wagon together. Pa in the middle with an arm around each of us. Did you two have a good time? He asked. Yes, we both eagerly answered. On the way home, we all sat on the front seat, cuddled under the quilts, Molly and I on either side of Pa, leaning on his shoulders. Good, he said. You'll hold me up. Go on, Job. Take us home now. That's a good boy. The swaying of the wagon in the soft, damp darkness, the warmth of Pa's body next to mine, and the steady clop-clop of Job's hooves soon lulled me to sleep. When we reached the cabin, Pa set us inside to bed while he took care of unhitching Job. As I climbed under the covers, I realized with surprise that I hadn't thought about Weasel once all day long. And that's the end of chapter 18. We don't have a question in Google Docs. I'm just going to ask that when you go to Google Classroom, you're going to check off that you read it by telling me one event that happened in chapter 18. Thanks, guys.